Imagine a brand new theme park just opened with thrilling roller coasters, the latest and greatest dark rides, as well as attractions that make the impossible possible. Now imagine that same exciting theme park, above its most colorful pathways, has a set of tracks that are completely unused. No roller coasters speeding by, no smiling riders waving to everyone below, just an unusual silence that makes you wonder, what is that ride and how do I get on it? That's what happened in the early years of Universal Islands of Adventure. One of its rides was constructed, delayed, and abandoned until being redesigned years later. This is the wubbulous story of Sylvester McMonkey McBean's very unusual driving machines at Universal Islands of Adventure. You may already know the original concept for Universal Islands of Adventure was a theme park called Cartoon World. For the purposes of this story, here's a quick recap. Cartoon World, planned to be the second gate next to Universal Studios Florida, was a theme park concept in the early 90s featuring licensed cartoon properties such as Looney Tunes, DC Comics, the work of Jay Ward, and Dr. Seuss. Universal, not having a strong cartoon catalog of its own, partnered with rights holders, Warner Brothers, Jay Ward's family, and Audrey Geisel, widow of the author known as Dr. Seuss. At first, she was not interested in the offer. Geisel, not realizing Universal's level of quality, was protective of her late husband's legacy and did not want his work cheapened into some sort of carnival. Her mind was made up, but Universal was not ready to give up. Executives connected with Dr. Seuss's literary agent, who was impressed by Universal's pitch and swayed Geisel to come see for herself. Universal gave Geisel the red carpet treatment, flying her out, hosting a Seuss banquet, and pitching their ideas. She agreed, and Universal penciled in Dr. Seuss's whimsical work into the plans for the upcoming Cartoon World theme park. Early park concepts included a children's area based on the characters and stories of Dr. Seuss. This artwork sketches out attractions such as a possible Mount Crumpet Grinch roller coaster and what comes across as a Seussian car ride. Publicly confirmed information about this ride is unavailable, but some broad details are revealed by zooming into this pixelated concept art. Excuse the low resolution. The concept, at least in this art, seemed to have a mostly low-to-the-ground roadway type track with some elevated flyovers, all on a dedicated plot of land. The ride type, although nice in concept, would take up a lot of real estate, much like Tomorrowland Speedway at the Magic Kingdom. Land in a theme park is valuable, considering how much space is needed for facilities, retail, dining, conveniences, and entertainment. With that in mind, the Dr. Seuss area may not have had enough room for such a ride. Another piece of Cartoon World concept art, this one by Wes Cook, outlines a more ambitious version of the Dr. Seuss world and car ride. This over-the-top concept art has some finer details when zoomed in, despite the low resolution. In this version, the ride's elevated layout weaves through the land's architecture, as well as small themed tunnels along the ride path, suggesting the ride could have had covered show scenes. But what story would the ride tell? Well, standing atop the ride's entrance is the Sylvester McMonkey McBean character from the Sneetches, hinting at the ride's potential theme. The concept art also has Sneetches walking along the tracks and two stubborn Zacks at an impasse below. As a note, the story of the Zacks was published in the same book as the Sneetches. More on those characters later. Overall, this concept was extravagant, but was more practical by using space more efficiently. The elevated roadways laid out a way to take up less room, build it above the land. The full concept of Cartoon World unfortunately never left the page. By most accounts, negotiations between Universal and Warner Brothers fell through, meaning Universal lost out on major intellectual properties such as Looney Tunes and DC Comics. Universal, still having the theme park rights for Jay Ward and Dr. Seuss properties, formed a new second gate using the success of Jurassic Park, the newly acquired Marvel Comics, and its leftover Cartoon World concepts. Universal transferred its plans for a Dr. Seuss children's area to this new park, Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. The Seussian land, to be named Seuss Landing, carried over, and so did many of its general ride concepts: round rides, a Cat in the Hat dark ride, and the potential Sneetch car ride. The company filed for the lengthy trademark of Sylvester McMonkey McBean's very unusual driving machines, and the car ride was underway. Islands of Adventure was a big step forward for Universal Orlando and theme parks in general. Its highly themed areas were more atmospheric than the backlot aesthetic of Universal Studios Florida, but the storytelling went beyond just beautiful visuals. Many of the park's attractions would be more innovative and creative than ever imagined. For example, Islands of Adventure wouldn't just have standard roller coasters, its coasters would have powerful launches and intertwined tracks that came within inches of other riders. Universal wasn't just designing another motion simulator, they were creating a never-before attempted hybrid of a dark ride and motion simulator. That was the level of innovation the creatives put into this park. The Dr. Seuss car ride, while on the tamer side for kids, was no exception. The ride system was unique to say the least. To get the basic idea, the Dr. Seuss car ride, known as Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines, was going to be an elevated monorail type system with individual guest-operated cars designed to bump other drivers. In short, the concept was more or less a combination of Tomorrowland Speedway and People Mover, but with bumper car features. Being about 15 feet high, the slow-moving ride would have nice sights of Seuss Landing from above. In that sense, it would be similar to the Pteranodon Flyer suspended family coaster in Islands of Adventure's Jurassic Park section. It was an unusual concept, but Universal found a manufacturer willing to take the job. Universal contracted UK-based manufacturer Severn Lamb to design, fabricate, and install the unusual ride system. Severn Lamb specialized in transportation systems such as trains, passenger vehicles, shuttles, riverboats, and monorails, plenty of which were installed at theme parks. This was no ordinary monorail, but Severn Lamb agreed to the challenge. The patent and other public documents for the Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines ride system are very detailed, giving a good idea of what the attraction would have been like. Here's a closer look. The two-passenger cars would travel along a guided, ribbon-like monorail track. Riders would control a few interactive features, such as the horn, lights, and most of all, speed. During the ride, guests could control the forward acceleration and deceleration by using a throttle, which was shown in the patent as a foot-operated pedal. To vary the speed, each car would have an onboard motor that could travel between 2.7 miles per hour and 5.5 miles per hour. This is where things get interesting. By controlling the speed, riders could hit other ride vehicles, like bumper cars. Usually, rides have safety features such as block zones to prevent vehicles from colliding. The patent, however, describes some technical details of how this would have safely worked. Essentially, riders could accelerate to rear-end the car in front of them. To reduce the force, each ride vehicle would have shock-absorbing bumpers on the front and rear. The bumpers went a step further by having a system of sensors that could detect collisions. The sensor system, upon impact, would enable an automatic controller to temporarily override guest controls. Simply put, the sensors would reduce the impact by speeding up the leading vehicle and slowing down the chasing vehicle. This would separate the two cars after bumping and possibly reduce traffic jams. The attraction could have up to 60 ride vehicles, which could make the dual track crowded and frantic. The patent also describes the possibility of anticipating collisions by using proximity sensors or similar technology. The vehicles could simulate or exaggerate the sensation of a collision with little or no actual physical impact, as explained in the patent. All these protections would reduce the force. Remember, the ride would be limited to low speeds, so the impacts would probably be closer to a bump than a crash. Riders could bump only from behind, meaning no head-on collisions. For additional safety, the vehicles also had secondary sensors programmed to stop motion in case of emergency impacts. Thematically, the Very Unusual Driving Machines would follow The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. The Sneetches is a story of the haves and the have-nots, the Starbelly Sneetches and the Plainbelly Sneetches. The Starbelly Sneetches, who played games and had picnics, never mingled with the Plainbelly Sneetches, who just wanted to belong. Luckily or unluckily for the lowly Plainbelly Sneetches, a charming con artist rolled into town with the answer to all their problems. This sly salesman, Sylvester McMonkey McBean, invented a star-on machine to stamp stars on the bellies of the Plainbelly Sneetches. For a low price, of course. They could finally fit in and enjoy all the star-bellied festivities. The Starbelly Sneetches took notice and did not like this trend one bit. Sylvester McMonkey McBean, being a savvy snake oil salesman, convinced them that their star bellies were out of style. Luckily or unluckily, he had just the invention to help. A star-off machine that wiped those unstylish stars right off, for a slightly marked up price, of course. This led to chaos. The Starbelly Sneeches were now Planebelly Sneeches, and the Planebelly Sneeches were now Starbelly Sneeches. They emptied their wallets to switch and swap their stars on and off. Stars on, stars off, stars on, you get the point. Once the Sneeches spent all their money, McBean left town in a car overflowing with cash. The Sneeches then realized they weren't so different after all and got along from then on, regardless of stars. Between the lines, the book touches on themes of discrimination, inclusion, and acceptance. But at first glance, it's a story about an eccentric business person with a wacky car and bizarre contraptions. It has all the basics any great Dr. Seuss theme park ride would ever need. The creative team adapted that story for the monorail car ride system. The attraction would have a dual layout, combining for about 2,800 feet of rideable track, and have two adjacent course options, the Star On side and the Star Off side. Each course would have a dedicated indoor show scene as if going through Sylvester McMonkey McBean's inventions. The Star On side's indoor show scene would have scenic props of stamping machines and mechanisms. This track would also journey into a restaurant next door, Circus McGurk's Cafe Stupendous, in the big top rafters among trapeze artist and an organist performer. For the Star Off side, the indoor show scene would have car wash style scenic props to scrub off the stars. Outside, the two courses would intertwine over Seuss Landing and travel alongside each other for the ride's finale. The tracks would travel on a rooftop as Sylvester McMonkey McBean leaves town in his getaway car full of cash. In the final scene, Starbellies and Planebellies would be together like the end of the book. Based on the track length and vehicle speeds, the ride would have lasted somewhere around 4 minutes. The team fabricated the scenic work for the very unusual driving machines off-site to be installed once the ride was ready. Designing the props and show scenes was a bit of a challenge because of the tight ride path. The scenic elements had to fit in small spaces while being out of guest reach. The ride vehicles would be decorated as well, having headlights, taillights, and spinning wheels. The vehicles would have had license plates of different Dr. Seuss characters, such as Gucky Gown. Riders could have possibly triggered sound effects from the dashboard, which would play through the car's onboard audio system. Plans for Sylvester McMonkey McBean's very unusual driving machines moved forward as construction began. The process was very involved because this was not a standalone ride. The track sprawled across the rooftops of Seuss Landing, which affected many of the area's buildings and pathways. As if that wasn't complicated enough, Seuss Landing was designed and engineered to have no straight lines in the style of a Dr. Seuss illustration. For this look, Universal went as far as to relocate hurricane-damaged trees, which were deformed from extreme winds. The fluid architecture was visually wonderful, but structurally difficult to engineer. Seuss's abstract illustrations weren't meant to work in real life, but the crew made it work by using shaped structural steel. The area had plenty of curved structures, such as twisted track supports for the monorail ride and freeform trusses over its station. Crews engineered and constructed sturdy yet squiggly support structures out of curved steel plates. These supports were so oddly shaped that two Seuss characters could be placed at the base of one of the structures. These were the Zacks, two prideful creatures who crossed paths but refused to budge when asked to move. They both stood their ground as time and society moved on, building entire cities around them. As the legend goes, these figures were the first pieces installed at Islands of Adventure. Thus, the entire park was constructed around these two, just like the book. To complete the Seuss look, the scenery and facades of Seuss Landing were carved from polystyrene foam, which was then sealed for durability. Even the tops of the buildings were dressed up. Crews put in a lot of work to make the Seussian world look good from the ground level and from above, with the monorail in mind. From concept to construction, Universal poured in a lot of time, resources, and effort into theming the rooftops. The only way to see Seuss Landing from that angle would be from the very unusual driving machines, which just goes to show how dedicated Universal was to include this ride. Seuss Landing even featured a Sneech Beach area, which the tracks passed over. The team had to overcome a lot of challenges as the ride hit some figurative bumps in the road. Progress on Sylvester McMonkey McBean's very unusual driving machines was behind schedule while the park's opening day neared. Work continued, but the ride's props were put in storage until it was up and running. It was a special but flawed ride system that still needed fine-tuning. Allegedly, the nearly £2 million British pound ride system cost closer to £5 million British pounds after corrections and modifications. Even still, the ride wasn't ready. The project was becoming more and more costly, and its opening was becoming more and more unlikely. If you're enjoying so far, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a video. Now back to those very unusual driving machines. The all-new Islands of Adventure soft opened in March 1999. Most of its rides were up and running for guests to preview, but other attractions needed some finishing touches. Specifically, Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines was a work in progress and not available for technical rehearsals. As a placeholder, the team designed and fabricated 2 decorative ride vehicles that would cycle the tracks. These cars were added very late into production to give the unfinished attraction some purpose in the meantime. They were even used in the park's dedication ceremony. The 2 decorative cars, which were likely modified ride vehicles, had some interesting technical details. Aside from the car bodies, their other features may have been similar to the Very Unusual ride vehicles. The front and rear bumpers had impact plates that seemed to be designed for collisions. The rear had cylindrical rubber bumpers, potentially to reduce collision noise. These cars also had headlights and taillights, another glimpse of what the ride vehicles would have looked like. Thematically, one of the decorative vehicles featured 2 Sneetches on their way to the beach, with a trunk full of gear and a picnic basket on the front bumper. Their license plate was a reference to the famous Stars Upon Thars line from the book. Sylvester McMonkey McBean himself was driving the other car, with a trunk full of gizmos and stars as well as a bass drum with the words, "My friends, I'm the fix-it-up chappie." But the incomplete ride was probably a job too complicated for even the fix-it-up chappie to finish. Even though the park preview period was extended by a few weeks, Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines was not ready for Islands of Adventure's official opening on May 28, 1999. The unfinished track was standing in plain sight over the pathways of Seuss Landing. The ride's scenic elements were fabricated, never installed, and put in storage. Historical aerial images reveal the rooftop scene was not decorated at that time. In a way, this was the Horton-sized elephant in the room, as Universal couldn't hide the unopened ride. Theme parks delay or cancel attractions all the time, but the average guest would never know about an unbuilt project. However, the partially finished Very Unusual Driving Machines was much more obvious. Guests noticed the ride and were often searching for the entrance. One Universal team member told the Orlando Sentinel, quote, "If I had $5 for every person that asked me about it, I'd retire tomorrow," end quote. Those unused tracks gave guests every reason to be curious. Observant fans were glancing around for any peeks into the ride, and the public was wondering what the holdup was. The opening of Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines was delayed. As to why, rumors suggest Universal executives were not satisfied with the design for a few reasons. First, the attraction would have had poor capacity, possibly only a few hundred riders per hour. Islands of Adventure, being Orlando's newest theme park, was expected to pull in large crowds, so efficiency was important. As an aside, the Pteranodon Flyers children's roller coaster across the park had similar capacity issues. This was managed with a rule that adults could ride only when accompanying a child. The Very Unusual Driving Machines ride may have needed a similar rule if it ever opened, but this is just speculation. Some rumors say the vehicles couldn't accommodate adults, which would have been an issue for parents wanting to ride with their children. As a note, ride documents claim the vehicles were designed with a minimum assumption of 175 pounds per rider. Second, and more importantly, the ride was not ideally equipped for emergency evacuations. Seuss Landing's creative director denied this rumor, explaining the vehicles would coast down the sloped tracks to safe exit areas. Battery-powered tug vehicles were supposedly available to rescue stranded cars. This was a point of conversation because most sections of the ride's monorail track did not have any accessible evacuation platforms, walkways, or stairs. For example, Magic Kingdom's People Mover has platforms on either side of the track. Considering the Seuss track was up to about 15 feet high, this meant riders could be stuck in the event of a power outage, malfunction, or other emergency. If an emergency were to occur mid-ride, the rumor mill believed riders would have no way to exit, and the vehicles could not return to the station on their own. If true, this was a serious omission, and raised several concerns. One was that riders might not remain seated during a stop, although the patent specified the ride would have restraints. Discussions were going on behind the scenes about modifying the ride system to meet Universal standards. The option of installing more evacuation platforms and exits would have been expensive, especially if designed in a Seuss style. Perhaps a solution would have been to rescue riders with a scissor lift or similar equipment, but that may be complicated to operate on the pathways of a busy theme park. No matter the workaround, the ride system did not turn out as intended. It needed a lot of work to get it up and running. Rumors suggest neither the manufacturer nor Universal were willing to pay for additional work, which allegedly was outside the scope of the contract. Thus, neither side was willing to give in, just like the Zacks, leaving the project at a standstill. A common claim is that the manufacturer, Severn Lamb, was facing financial difficulties. Regardless, the ride had a lot of issues to overcome, and the manufacturer was no longer available for the project. The attraction, which once had high expectations, was becoming more trouble than it was worth, even with the track already in place. When guests first visited Islands of Adventure, a sign at the entrance of the delayed Seuss car ride teased its eventual opening for the next year, 2000. When that time came, the sign was updated with a new opening year, 2001. The ride seemed to still have a chance, but that changed by early 2001. The sign no longer had an opening date. A park spokesperson confirmed the ride was not ready and did not have an opening date. The original version of Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines was cancelled. A ride like the Very Unusual Driving Machines was much needed at Islands of Adventure in its opening year. The brand new park was criticized for its lack of family-level attractions. Universal addressed this gap in its lineup by opening Stormforce Accelatron and Flying Unicorn in the park's second year. Despite being a needed ride type, the Very Unusual Driving Machines were not in the park's plans. The trademark was abandoned in 2003 as Universal went in another direction. The tracks remained untouched for the foreseeable future. The ride vehicles, however, didn't last. Seuss Landing's creative director joked that the never-used ride vehicles were locked away next to the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark. The technical difficulties of Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines led to a legal dispute between Universal Orlando and the ride's manufacturer, Severn Lamb. The case offers some potential reasons why the project fell through. According to public documents, Universal alleged that deficiencies in the ride's design and engineering supposedly resulted in delays, additional work, and increased construction cost. Universal also alleged the attraction did not meet its intended, quote, guest experience, creative intent, and guest throughput objectives, end quote. Severn Lamb disputed Universal's allegations, and because the case was settled before trial, those claims were never decided by a court. A jury trial had been scheduled for 2006, but the parties reached an out-of-court settlement just weeks beforehand. The terms of that agreement were not made public. While the Very Unusual Driving Machines ride was put on ice, Universal made use of its vacant queue space. In the park's opening year, the area was used as a break room for the team members of the short-lived ferry boat ride, Island Skipper Tours. In 2000, the venue was a part of the park's first Grinchmas celebration. The queue space under the load station during the event was used for a seasonal meet and greet attraction called Grinch's Lair, which lasted in that venue until 2005. By that point, Universal had sky-high plans for the venue and its abandoned ride system. Even though the original Sylvester McMonkey McBean attraction was cancelled, the tracks were still in place over the colorful paths of Seuss Landing. Presumably, the options by then were to leave it standing abandoned, scrap the project and start over, or salvage what had already been built. For the most practical solution, Universal brought in German manufacturer Mack Rides to retrofit the ride system into a working attraction, although not the original concept. The new manufacturer played the role of a true fix-it-up chappie by converting the existing ride system into Mack's powered coaster model. This gentle ride model uses a coaster-style track and propels trains at a controlled speed rather than relying on gravity. Mack Rides modified the Very Unusual Driving Machines by engineering, designing, and installing new powered coaster track directly on the existing monorail-style structures. Despite using a powered roller coaster ride system, the attraction would operate similar to a slow-moving people mover. The monorail track was positioned underneath, almost like a track spine. The layout was adjusted in some areas for clearance or other reasons. In these sections, the ribbon track was removed, and the tubular coaster track was reinforced with triangle-shaped skeletal framework. Additionally, new emergency platforms and escapes were added throughout the layout, finally addressing its notorious setback. With the new ride in place, the attraction was finally nearing its long-awaited opening. In spring 2006, Universal Orlando Resort announced its upcoming ride, the High-in-the-Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride. The ride had been shuttered for the first 7 years of the park's existence, but soon, guests could see Seuss Landing from a new perspective. On June 22, 2006, the attraction, originally designed as Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines, opened as the High-in-the-Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride, two excessively long names that theme park YouTubers would have to say for the rest of history. These two attractions have more in common than just long names. In many ways, the Seuss Trolley Train Ride is an updated version of what the old concept was going to be. Elements of the cancelled attraction carried over as guests could finally take a ride on the unused layout. The ride, being built atop the existing course, operates as a Mobius loop, meaning the two tracks connect as one continuous circuit, which begin and end on opposite sides of the station. The biggest difference is the ride vehicles. Instead of individual bumper cars, the Seuss Trolley Train Ride has large, 20-passenger slow-moving trains. This allows for higher capacity, but without the bumper car feature as originally planned. Although different, a ride on the Seuss Trolley gives riders a glimpse of what the Very Unusual Driving Machines would have been like. Much of the scenic work that was designed and created for the unused concept was installed for the ride's 2006 opening. Visually, the ride follows the theme of the Sneetches and the story's star machines. The queue has a lot of Sylvester McMonkey McBean theming, likely very similar to how the queue of the Very Unusual Driving Machines was meant to be. The sign at the entrance has wacky gadgetry churning stars. Guests enter under a Sneetches In sign into a corrugated tunnel, as if stepping into one of Sylvester McMonkey McBean's inventions. The ground floor of the queue is decorated with excerpts from the Sneetches, displayed over beach-themed painted walls. The queue continues up a ramp that circles around the Fix-It-Up Chappie, tinkering on a contraption surrounded by stars and dollar signs. On the upper floor, guests arrive at the dual loading station where they board the star-decorated trains. The names of the ride's 4 trains, Blinky, Sneepy, Hotshot, and Oliver Bolivar, short for Oliver Bolivar Butt, are from Dr. Seuss's story Too Many Daves, which was published in the same book as the Sneetches. Each side of the loop offers a different experience. The teal track passes through the Star On machine, and the purple side passes through the Star Off machine. Each loop has remnants of the Very Unusual Driving Machines concept, almost like taking a ride on the never-opened attraction. Starting with the Star On side, the train rolls out of the station, by signage referencing Starbelly Sneetches, and into the big top of Circus McGurk's Cafe Stupendous. The teal track rounds the restaurant, back outside, and into a dedicated show scene. This covered passageway is crammed with Sylvester McMonkey McBean's infamous Star On machinery, which is pumping Sneetches through tubes. Before the train leaves, an arm with a rubber stamp leans toward the ride vehicle. Right out of the station, the Star Off side starts with a small show scene of a star wash to scrub the stars off the Sneetches' bellies. Cleaning devices reach out to the train as bubbles float in the air. Outside, this track winds around the carousel. After their show scenes, the two layouts thread above Seuss Landing, providing views of the lagoon and Sneetch Beach below. The dual tracks meet and ride alongside each other on a rooftop scene where Sylvester McMonkey McBean is seen fleeing town in a car stuffed with cash. This scene also has clotheslines of too many shirts with the name Dave on them, a reference to Too Many Daves. The train rolls into the final scene, decorated with the closing words of the story, stars sprung from the ceiling, and sounds of seagulls like Sneetch Beach. At the end, Starbelly and Plainbelly Sneetches enjoy Frankenfurter roast together. Although the scenery of the High-in-the-Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride follows the story of the Sneetches, the ride's 4 onboard audio tracks feature other Dr. Seuss books, such as And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street and Mr. Brown Can Moo, Can You? The High-in-the-Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride, although enjoyable and nice for sightseeing, had a messy and prolonged development. Its creative vision shifted before opening. The ride's props, as seen in old drawings and photos, were built back in the 90s for the unfinished Very Unusual Driving Machines ride. The original concept can be easy to imagine by visualizing bumper car vehicles with the current scenic design and ride layout. That may give you a sense of how the Very Unusual Driving Machines attraction would have been, but it also explains why the Seuss trolley may seem strange. What exists today is similar to the Very Unusual Driving Machines, but not different enough to make the Seuss trolley its own distinct ride. The result is a piecemeal ride that doesn't fully commit to any one theme. The mix of sneak scenery and mismatched Dr. Seuss audio is disjointed. But at the same time, the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley train ride brings a lot of value to Seuss Landing. The trains in motion add a lot of kinetic energy to the land. Guests now have a reason to look up and admire the sights from top to bottom. Considering Seuss Landing was designed with a lot of low-to-the-ground elements with little ones in mind, the High in the Sky movement makes the land more alive and more complete. Also, riders can now appreciate the views from above, just as Seuss Landing was designed to be seen. For example, the Green Eggs and Ham restaurant from a bird's eye view looks like it's on a plate. For many more reasons like that, the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley train ride highlights the details of Seuss Landing. Next time you visit, notice how much the cancelled Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines ride shaped Seuss Landing's overall design. Look up or down if you're on the ride to enjoy the land in a new way. Take a moment to appreciate the Zacks who have been bickering under the track support since day one, as well as the traces of Sneetch references around the land. The ride's makeshift past is a reminder that mistakes happen, but with the right perspective, can become something memorable. The attraction went from being an eyesore in Islands of Adventure to having some of the most spectacular views around the entire park. Seuss Landing is a place where Theodore Geisel's imagination lives on, and the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley train ride is an inspiration to never give up. You might just create something special. What are your thoughts on the cancelled Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines? Comment your thoughts below. Special thanks to the Storybook Amusement patrons. Shout out to the producer credits, Parallel Discover, and Nick E. For more, follow Storybook Amusement on social media and Patreon. Find all the links in the description and check out these other videos while you're here. Thanks everyone for watching.